For centuries, the Spanish mines of Almadén and the dungeons of ancient China guarded their most terrifying secret. Miners knew that reddish-brown cinnabar was the scorched blood of the earth itself. When heavy pickaxes shattered the rock, heavy, shiny droplets of liquid silver hydrargyrum began to flow from the cracks like the tears of a frightened underground nymph. This substance combined the cold gleam of iron with the flowing grace of spring water. In the semi-darkness of the mines, a mirrored sphere splayed upon a dirty palm seemed alive, reflecting the torchlight like a fragment of a distant star. Yet, for this unearthly beauty, the underworld demanded a brutal price. Months of working near this quicksilver irreversibly changed people. First came a subtle tremor in the hands, followed by insomnia, nightmares, sudden bursts of rage, and ultimately, complete madness. While monarchs received the pure metal, the workers lost their minds. This magical beauty also captivated the mind of the man who held the entire East in terror, the first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang. The great conqueror frantically feared old age and death. Court alchemists, blinded by the properties of the liquid metal, assured him that Mercury was the very elixir of immortality. They claimed that a metal which did not succumb to fire and always remained fluid would grant the body eternal life. The emperor believed them and locked himself away in his palace. Every day, he drank wine laced with mercury salts and swallowed pills of eternal life. Instead of divine status, the poison brought him paranoia. The final years of his reign turned into a nightmare. The emperor hid from ghosts in the labyrinths of his palace and tortured his servants. In 210 BCE, he died in agonizing torment during a journey. To conceal the smell of decay, the tyrant's corpse was carried back to the capital in a cart piled with rotten fish. Yet even after death, Mercury did not release its captive. He was buried in a grandiose tomb guarded by the terracotta army. The chronicler Sima Qian wrote that within the burial chamber, his entire empire was recreated, where instead of water, hundreds of rivers and seas made of pure mercury flowed through stone canyons. Special mechanisms forced the metal to circulate, creating the illusion of eternal waves. The emperor sought to rule eternity, but became a permanent prisoner of a silver ocean. Modern archaeologists still do not dare open the central chamber instruments show that the level of mercury vapors in those depths exceeds the norm hundreds of times over. The rivers of death still flow in the darkness, guarding the peace of the mad ruler. The Middle Ages shrouded Europe in a thick fog of mysticism and fear. In an era when the Black Death decimated cities and dogmas restricted human thought, true science hid in cellars and castle cliffs. There, by the dim light of candles, amidst the scents of sulfur and vinegar, alchemists spent hours whispering incantations over boiling retorts. To them, Mercury was not just a metal, but Mercury the elusive god of secret knowledge. It was considered the prime matter, prima materia, the living essence of the universe, the great mother of all existence. They believed that if they could fix this rebellious spirit and strip it of its volatility, they could unlock the greatest secrets of existence. Yet, burning even hotter than philosophy was the desire for gold. Alchemists believed that the philosopher's stone would force the gray liquid to instantly ignite with the solar brilliance of pure aurum. Others sought within it the panacea, an elixir of absolute immortality. Oh, how dearly humanity paid for these illusions. Entire generations of researchers balanced on the thin line between genius and irreversible madness. Day after day, they inhaled the sweetish, invisible vapors rising from the heated metal. They considered headaches and dizziness to be signs of approaching divine revelation, completely unaware that the treacherous mercury was destroying their brains step by step. This thirst for knowledge did not spare even the titans of rationalism. Even Isaac Newton had his dark passion. Locking himself away in his secret laboratory at Trinity College, he spent hours conjuring over bowls of mercury, seeking within it the universal key to the universe. The great thinker not only breathed the poison in confined spaces, but also, following the custom of the time, tasted chemical compounds to identify them. The consequences manifested in 1693. At the peak of his fame, Newton suddenly suffered a profound mental breakdown. He was gripped by persecution mania. He accused his closest friends of treason, suffered from insomnia, deep depression, a severe tremor in his hands, and wrote strange, aggressive letters. Contemporaries believe the scientist had simply lost his mind from overwork. Only at the end of the 20th century did spectral analysis of surviving strands of Newton's hair shock the world. The concentration of mercury in his body exceeded the norm dozens of times over. His madness was a classic case of acute poisoning. Newton's body was eventually able to partially eliminate the toxin, allowing him to return to science, but his character remained forever somber, and his mind retained deep, invisible scars from his encounter with the mirrored poison. During the 18th and 19th centuries, mercury left the laboratories of scientists and entered the everyday lives of ordinary people as an industrial raw material, bringing with it a silent and gruesome epidemic. It left its most horrifying mark on the production of felt hats, which were then an obligatory status symbol for every gentleman. Millions of buyers had no idea what a terrible price was paid for this everyday elegance. The issue lay in the technology. To turn the coarse fur of a rabbit or beaver into soft felt, it was treated with a solution of mercury nitrate. In cramped workshops completely lacking ventilation, vats of water boiled from morning till night. Artisans manually washed and ironed the mercury-soaked fur, inhaling an invisible, sweetish silver fog for years and absorbing the poison through the skin of their hands. Before long, their lives inevitably turned into a living hell. First came the hatter's shakes. Hands began to tremble so violently that a person could no longer button a shirt or lift a glass of water to their lips. Their gait became unsteady, and their speech grew slurred. Yet, the most terrifying blow the treacherous metal dealt was to the psyche, completely dismantling their personalities. The artisans became pathologically shy, panicked at the sight of strangers, and suffered from chronic insomnia, hallucinations, and severe depression that could instantly shift into bursts of wild rage. Due to chronic intoxication, their teeth fell out and their gums bled. Society wrote these wretched souls off as drunkards or eccentrics, giving rise to a firm idiom in the English language, mad as a hatter. It was this tragic image of a broken craftsman that inspired Lewis Carroll to create the famous Mad Hatter in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. But while the Mad Tea Party appears amusing and absurd on the pages of the book, in the reality of Victorian England, it hid a deep social drama of thousands of poor families. Fathers lost their minds, human dignity, and memories for a single purpose, so that wealthy dandies could proudly wear their perfectly smooth top hats. Mercury proved, once again, that for any external luster, it takes the most precious thing of all the human essence. In the 17th century, medieval mysticism and alchemical chaos finally gave way to rigorous and precise science. Humanity no longer wanted to blindly believe in magic. It yearned to measure and prove the forces of nature through logic. Mercury changed its mask once more. From a sinister subterranean demon, it transformed into the primary instrumental assistant of scientists, helping humanity for the first time in history to measure what was previously considered invisible, the air itself. In the first half of the 17th century, naturalists still believed in Aristotle's dogma that the space around us possessed no weight and that nature frantically abhors a vacuum, horror vacui. However, in 1643, a young Italian physicist named Evangelista Torricelli, the last student of Galileo, questioned this. He was intrigued by a simple question. Does the atmospheric ocean, at the bottom of which we all live, possess actual physical weight? To test his hypothesis, Torricelli needed an incredibly heavy yet fluid substance. Water was unsuited for this, as the experiment would require a glass tube as tall as a 3-story building. Therefore, the scientists' gaze fell upon mercury, the only metal that remains liquid at room temperature and possesses a colossal density, nearly 14 times greater than that of water. Torricelli took a glass tube about a meter long, hermetically sealed at one end, and filled it to the brim with heavy mercury. He then sealed the open end with his finger, inverted the tube, and lowered it into a wide basin half filled with mercury. When he removed his finger, the heavy silver liquid rushed downward under its own weight. However, it did not pour out completely. The column of metal froze dead in its tracks at exactly 760 millimeters. The most astonishing part was at the top. In the upper section of the tube from which the mercury had receded, an absolutely clean, transparent space had formed. There was neither air nor metal there. The world saw an absolute vacuum, the Torricellian void, for the very first time. This triumph of human thought proved that the mercury did not pour out completely because the immense multi-kilometer thickness of the Earth's atmosphere presses from the outside onto the surface of the metal in the basin. The weight of the atmospheric ocean perfectly balanced the weight of the silver column inside the glass. Observing his device day after day, Torricelli noticed that the mercury level was constantly fluctuating, reacting to the weather. Before a storm or a tempest, the atmosphere grew lighter, and the metal obediently crept downward, warning people of danger. Thus, mercury helped create the world's first barometer. This device taught humanity to predict the whims of nature, saving thousands of lives at sea and on land. A great mind had tamed the wild substance, forcing it to speak the language of precise numbers. Yet, mercury remained a dangerous poison that never forgave researchers a single extra breath near an open basin. Having mastered the invisible weight of the atmosphere, humanity sought to conquer another elusive element, heat. For centuries, physicians and naturalists had tried to precisely measure temperature, but early thermoscopes were highly imperfect. The water inside them froze and shattered the fragile glass, while wine alcohol boiled too early, leaving medicine in the dark shadows of subjective guesswork. At the beginning of the 18th century, Gabriel Fahrenheit, a brilliant German physicist and glassblower, searched his Amsterdam workshop for the perfect substance that would react linearly and unmistakably to the slightest breath of heat or cold. His gaze confidently fell upon the familiar silver tears, pure, heavy mercury. This metal possessed a colossal liquid range, neither freezing in the bitterest European frosts, nor boiling even under intense heat. In 1714, Fahrenheit achieved a true technological breakthrough. After purifying the mercury of even the smallest impurities, he used his jewelry-like glass-blowing craftsmanship to lock this mirrored metal inside an exceedingly thin glass bulb with a long capillary stem. The inventor was thrilled. When he immersed the device in a mixture of ice and salt, the silver thread obediently contracted. But the moment he touched the glass with his warm palm, the metal rushed swiftly upward with absolute mathematical precision. Thus, Fahrenheit created the world's first reliable mercury thermometer and offered the world his temperature scale. This invention sparked a revolution, eventually entering every home and hospital. For the next 3 centuries, this thin silver line decided the fates of millions of patients. Mothers stared into the microscopic divisions of the capillary over the beds of feverish children. If the mercury froze at a safe mark, relief returned to the home. If it crept relentlessly to a critical maximum, it was a signal of mortal danger. Mercury, which had previously been associated only with the madness of miners and the paranoia of emperors, found a noble new life, becoming a synonym for medical care and salvation. Yet, while serving human health, a dangerous predator still lurked inside the fragile glass shell. It was simply biding its time, ready to break free as a toxic vapor at the first careless movement of a human hand. Mercury had struck a temporary truce with humanity, but its destructive nature had vanished nowhere. The most terrifying drama involving Mercury unfolded in the 20th century, when humanity, blinded by colossal industrial progress, forgot basic caution. This is a story of how the cynicism of large corporations turned the natural beauty of a metal into a concentrated nightmare for generations. Japan, early 1950s. The picturesque fishing town of Minamata, nestled on the shores of a bay, lived in harmony with nature, feeding families entirely from marine catches. However, nearby, a gigantic chemical plant belonging to the Chiso Corporation was operating at full capacity. In a pursuit of profit, management secretly dumped industrial waste directly into the transparent waters of the bay for years. The main disaster lay in the fact that these wastewater discharges contained methyl mercury, an extremely stable and toxic organic form of the metal. Upon entering the water, the poison did not disappear. Instead, it became part of the biological food chain, moving from plankton to small fish, and eventually to large predators. With every link, the concentration of the toxin grew exponentially, turning the daily food of the fishermen into a slow death sentence. The local cats went mad first. They twitched strangely, lost coordination, and leaped into the sea during epileptic seizures. Before long, the illness crossed the thresholds of human homes. People who had fed on the poisoned fish for years were seized by convulsions, losing their sight, hearing, and speech. The most horrific blow Mercury dealt was to the future. Children were born with severe, incurable congenital disabilities, as methylmercury easily breached the placental barrier. The world shuddered when American photojournalist Eugene Smith, risking his life, documented this human agony. His legendary photograph, Tomoko Uemura in her bath, showing a mother holding her severely deformed adult child in the water with boundless love and profound sorrow, became a resounding cry of pain for the entire planet. This lesson did not pass in vain. In 2013, under the auspices of the UN, the Minamata Convention on Mercury was signed. The global community made a strong-willed decision to completely phase out the use of this element. Today, we are witnessing the final farewell to this dangerous substance. Fragile, old thermometers have been replaced by digital counterparts, and the abandoned mines in Almadén, Spain, are closed forever and transformed into museums. Mercury is returning to its millennial sleep within the subterranean depths. It was the only metal that flatly refused to be solid, a unique substance that gifted us precise science and medicine, but very nearly took away our sanity. Today, we look upon this liquid mirror with deep respect, but strictly from a distance, like a dangerous wild beast locked inside the cage of history.